So I think what I would recommend is we go into the episode and talk about how correct we were on all of our picks this week.
D3 Datacast celebrating D3 Datacast.
Welcome into another bonus episode of the D3 Datacast. We're going to go through our regional rankings. We got week 3 official results from the NCAA. Zach, how are you feeling after the week 3 regional rankings we saw released on Tuesday?
I'm feeling great, Matt, because as your administrative assistant, I was the one going through and adding some lines, into our slides where we were wrong, where we were, maybe just off by a place or two. And there wasn't a lot for me to do. So this is great.
You can take the rest of the day off there, Mr. Assistant.
All right, Matt, let's dive right into our review and reaction, starting in Region 1, where we have Trinity, Connecticut taking the top spot in Region 1, as we expected, followed by Tufts, Williams. Matt, this is a trio we've talked about a few times the last couple of weeks. St. Joseph did indeed come in 4th, followed by Albertus Magnus 5th, Conn College 6th, and rounding out the Region 1 rankings for Week 3 is Amherst. We thought Morrisville State would hold on to that spot. I believe we talked about the possibility of maybe Amherst was lurking, but ultimately with the 600 winning percentage, we didn't think that they would move in. However, they did indeed.
Well, we didn't realize when we started with Region 1 last week that 600 would be like wildly good winning percentage to get you ranked this week. So we didn't fully consider Amherst. We probably should have 3 and 6 versus region ranked. A win over Tufts looks pretty good on this board. It is still surprising to me, 192 points of winning percentage they're giving up against Morrisville State. Morrisville State, we're still seeing on the positive side of 500 on the strength of the schedule. Still not a good SOS. And only one regionally ranked win. I'm still surprised they made that change, but I think what we'll see is maybe this is the type of thing that the committee is going for this week. And yes, you pointed out St. Joseph, Albertus, Conn College. We predicted that back in week 2. I think the problem was we were just too prescient with things and we were too far ahead of the committee. And now they finally caught up to us. I'm going to go with that story. Don't tell me otherwise.
Sounds good.
But I think this was like one of our biggest misses, actually, was this region. Morrisville State out, Amherst in. I think that was ended up being a good week for us here.
Yeah, as we will see. Starting as we move into Region 2, Matt, this is one of the 5 perfect regions we had. Spoiler alert. Region 2, it's Keene State at the top, followed by Nichols, Clark, WPI, Western New England 5th, and then Brandeis holding on to that 6th and final spot. Of course, Region 2, we have to say it every time, just 6 ranked teams being the smallest region. All other regions have 7 ranked teams. We talked about it, Matt. This was the first of a few instances we saw where a sub 600 winning percentage team, it makes it into the regional rankings in large part due to just a lack of quality alternatives.
Yeah, Brandeis in this region, I think we predicted that because there are not, like you said, not a ton of other places to go. They are 4 and 7 versus regionally ranked. All those wins in conference there, but a win over Wash U. When you start looking at quality of wins, Brandeis does still stand out. But yeah, overall, not a ton to talk about in Region 2 because I think when you just look at the data, it lays out fairly straightforward. Once you decide that you're okay with taking a team like Brandeis into the rankings, then I think it just kind of lays out 1 through 6 for you.
And this is where we've heard there are no floors.
Yeah.
Right? So
yes.
Maybe a case where if there was, Brandeis wouldn't be under consideration, but with there being no floors, you throw them in there and look, what they're compared to. And it's not like Endicott was an overwhelmingly attractive option in other regards. Yeah. So this is where we are.
And let's be clear. I don't think anyone out there in TV land should consider our prediction success with necessarily endorsement of all of the ranking choices the committee made. I think we went into this trying to do what we thought the committees would do, not necessarily interpret the data how we might if we were in charge of the whole shoot and match. Not saying we would do it correct either, just we're predicting what the committee would do, not giving our opinions into the matter through this process.
All right, Region 3, Oswego State, number 1, Hobart 2nd, St. Lawrence 3rd, Utica 4th, Nazareth 5th, Farmingdale State 6th. RPI gets that final spot at number 7. Matt, interestingly, we had Farmingdale State correctly slotted here, but we had RPI and Nazareth flipped from where they ultimately came in. Fifth for Nazareth, seventh for RPI. We had it the other way around.
Yeah, really tough. I think we called out when we looked at specifically these three resumes. They're all kind of across the board as far as winning percentage on down and then strength of schedule on up. So it's kind of hard to determine what you might see the committee do in a region like this. I am a little bit surprised, though, to see Nazareth and RPI flipped. Again, I'm forgetting now if we did any sort of three-team comparison or if we looked at common opponents or head-to-heads. I don't think that there was really many between RPI and Nazareth, but we've seen like this kind of 108 winning percentage point gap and a 53-point strength of schedule gap. That seems like that's gone in favor of the winning percentage in the past. Also, if you look at the regionally ranked opponents, in my mind, RPIs are a little bit stronger, their wins. Now, they are 2-4 rather than 2-2. Again, I think these three teams are probably all pretty tight, so it's not really a big deal what order you put them in. I just thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, as I recall, we ended up looking more at RPI versus Utica because of RPI's strength of schedule
Yeah.
and the quality of their regionally ranked opponent wins. But clearly, our RPI must have been well behind Utica to be flipped with Nazareth
Maybe,
there. So
maybe.
yeah, interesting.
Region 4.
Region 4, Matt, it's NYU at the top. You know, we noted that the gap between Rowan and DeSales had closed, but we thought it would remain Rowan 2, DeSales 3. That is indeed what we see. Stockton 4, TCNJ 5, Stevens 6, Ramapo 7. Another tough decision that we ultimately got right was that TCNJ Stevens Ramapo order.
Yeah.
And as we even noted in our predictions episode, that slotting Stevens in between them is really trying to thread a needle when you look at the comparison between the strength of schedule, well, really the resume across the board for TCNJ and Ramapo. There's not a lot of separation between those two, and so to try to slot another team in there felt like maybe it was a low percentage chance, but ultimately, Matt, we arrived at the elegant solution.
Yes, the same solution as the committee. And we kind of looked just at the previous week's rankings and saw that Ramapo and TCNJ had kind of just flipped resumes, and Stevens's resume had kind of stayed fairly static. So we thought, hey, let's just switch these two teams in the rankings and see if it works out. And this week it did, and there were no changes in Region 4 for us. So yeah, not super surprising to see. Rowan and DeSales did get closer, but I think with the strength of schedule advantage and some of those wins there for Rowan, they're still on top.
All right, Region 4 was another perfect region for us there, Matt. All right, on to 5. We have Widener at the top, Hood second, Catholic third. We felt like those three slotted pretty easily into the top 3, followed by Eastern 4. And then, Matt, we had a big discussion about the Centennial grouping here. Despite the lack of winning percentage compared to the other trio, we had Swarthmore 5th, and that is indeed what we see here in the regional rankings that were released for week 3 here from the committee. And ultimately, we went with Johns Hopkins and Gettysburg, which it was correct. However, in the actual rankings, Gettysburg gets the 6th spot. Johns Hopkins gets the 7th spot.
Yeah, we were trying to do a 3-team comparison with Franklin and Marshall. So we threw out the head-to-heads, and then we slotted them, Johns Hopkins, then Gettysburg. Who knows what the committee eventually did, but maybe they realized that these 3 teams were very tight, and so they looked at a reason to take 2 of the teams, and so they noted, hey, Gettysburg has a win against WPI, Johns Hopkins has a higher strength of schedule. Let's use that to remove Franklin and Marshall, and then if we just have a 2-team comparison, maybe the Gettysburg head-to-head, the dual wins over Johns Hopkins flipped them. I'm not exactly sure. This was a very messy situation between these 4 Centennial teams here. I think ultimately we got it pretty close, just flipping the last 2 teams. Swarthmore, the strength of their good wins kept them on top of the grouping. Franklin and Marshall, without kind of another piece of criteria in their favor, kept them out. That's kind of what we thought was the case. Turns out that was correct, just flipping 2 of the teams in the middle there.
And we talked about the process, not knowing exactly how that plays out when you're in a multi-team comparison situation. This maybe seems like they did do a process of elimination to be able to get down to where a Gettysburg head-to-head over Johns Hopkins maybe was the difference. I don't know.
Yeah, tough to say, but we know it was very tight, so they're probably making very marginal decisions to try to comb through this.
But Matt, probably worth noting here that it seems clear that they made the decision in the primary criteria because look over at the non-conference strength of schedule. Johns Hopkins a significant advantage over
Yeah,
Gettysburg. So it
right.
seems like if it had gone to the second page, Hopkins would have had a big advantage there.
First page decision right here.
There we go. All right, Region 6, Hampton Sydney, number 1, followed by Randolph-Macon 2, Guilford 3, Virginia Wesleyan 4, Christopher Newport 5. That seemed like a pretty clear 1 through 5 for us. And then it's Emory, followed by Roanoke. Matt, that's just a flip of what we thought. We thought Roanoke would get the advantage over Emory because they have the edge in terms of winning percentage and strength of schedule, but ultimately it must be the committee felt that the quantity and quality of Emory's wins over regionally ranked opponents was enough to make that flip.
Yeah, this is one case looking at Roanoke's regionally ranked record here, 2-7. The committee talks about it being results versus regionally ranked opponents. They're looking at that whole thing. Here for Roanoke, one thing you might interpret if you're the committee is 9 opportunities against regionally ranked teams, and you've only won 2 of those. So maybe that ends up hurting you a little bit in comparison to Emory, who's won closer to half their games. If you're looking at that piece of criteria, you might say Roanoke doesn't necessarily belong with these regionally ranked teams, but maybe Emory does because they've been able to be successful against them. This is one place that we've seen this. I think there's another place later on that we might see something similar come into play. But I don't know. In here, similar-ish number of opportunities in that it's like 9 or more. It's a bunch of opportunities. But I think as you noted during the episode, the difference is really that Emory won a bunch of their extra games. So really, if you to even it up for Roanoke, you'd have to give them like 4 extra regionally ranked games, and they'd have to win them all. So the committee obviously saw that as a huge advantage in that criteria. We didn't necessarily expect it to overcome the deficiencies in the other ones, especially since we're talking about a sub 600 winning percentage. But as we've seen on several slides, the committee has not shied away from winning percentages that low if they think the other criteria weigh heavily in the team's favor.
Yeah, I think that makes sense the way you talk through it in terms of criteria, but let's just go to the winning percentage and strength of schedule. By this SOS metric, we can, maybe debate whether that's good or bad, but by this SOS metric, Roanoke has the 611 compared to Emory's 599. Therefore, you would say Roanoke has played the harder schedule. They also have won more games with the higher winning percentage. So it seems a little bit counterintuitive or maybe backwards to then all of a sudden put Emory because of how they've performed in a certain subset instead of looking at the total strength of the schedule and the total winning percentage. I don't know. I don't know that it's necessarily a misapplication of the criteria, but perhaps an area where the criteria as it's applied, if you really dig into that application, it doesn't maybe make as much sense as it should.
Yeah, then you get into situations of using the RRO category to help interpret the strength of schedule category. And my reading is that the committee has made it fairly clear, or at least this is what I've heard Luke Flakertzy say on QCast, Hoopsville, etc. I don't think they feel that their charge is to interpret the criteria. It's to use the criteria to make decisions. So if they won't necessarily look at it and say, well, that means that their strength of schedule meant this or that. They're just saying this is the strength of schedule. This is the results versus regionally ranked opponents. And I think that's how they're using it this year.
Let's go to Region 7, Matt, to the home turf where we officially have a winning streak. It's another perfect week for us here in Region 7. Case Western Reserve takes over the top spot in Region 7. John Carroll, 2nd. Trine, 3rd. Calvin, 4th. Carnegie Mellon, 5th. And then we went out on a bit of a limb, Matt, to predict that Hope would come in 6th, jumping Mount Union 7th. That's indeed what happened.
Yeah, this time of year, if you have home court, you have to protect home court. I'm glad that we were able to do that in Region 7 here, our home turf. But yeah, Mount Union 0-2 versus regionally ranked opponents. Committee doesn't like that if they have other options, I think. So they dropped a spot. I wonder how close was the conversation with a team like a Marietta or even an Otterbein. They only have 1 win versus regionally ranked, but it's against John Carroll. Were they in the mix at all in those conversations? I'd be curious to know that. I think what we get here with Mount Union, though, is a little bit of interesting nature of how teams jump in and jump out of the rankings and how that affects other teams, uh, even in that like lagging a week nature. I think a team that was in the week 1 rankings was St. John's of Minnesota, who Mount Union beat, if I have that correctly. Then they fell out, and so Mount Union fell to 0-2. This week, we're going to see them jump back in, so Mount Union will get another win. So it's kind of interesting how those results around the country will kind of follow other teams on other slides here, but that's kind of the way things work. So I think, again, I don't know how close it was between Hope and Mount Union, but Mount Union getting that one regionally ranked win back, does that sort of almost automatically flip the order back into Mount Union's favor? We'll have to see.
Obviously, much more will take place before the data set is complete for the next regional ranking. So there'll be much more than that just to consider, but definitely interesting. Region 8, Matt, this was a tough one. We acknowledge that, and things got a little goofy here. Not so at the top. Wash U, we thought would take the top spot from Illinois Wesleyan just because they had a pretty fantastic week across the board, just in terms of results and how the data shifted in their favor across the board. So it's Wash U 1, followed by Illinois Wesleyan, Elmhurst 3. Anderson gets the 4th spot, Matt. Wisconsin Lutheran, the 5th spot. Chicago 6th, another one of those sub 600 winning percentage UAAs. And St. Norbert gets the 7th spot. We thought Carthage would hang in. Matt, just starting off here with the Wisconsin Lutheran Anderson flip, I think this is probably a case where they did go to the second page, so to speak, looking at that secondary criteria. You see, the numbers for Wisconsin Lutheran and Anderson very close across the board, with a key differentiating factor there when you do go to secondary criteria in the non-conference strength of schedule.
Yeah, I think we missed that one based on the secondary criteria. I think the answer was right there staring us in the face. We kind of noted it was very close across the board, so we went with the .002 advantage in strength of schedule. And I think they're going to consider that a tie and definitely look at the NCSOS. And I think if we had, this was like our stupidest ranking, I think, in of the whole episode. We could have just made the Anderson Wisconsin Lutheran.
We were preoccupied with trying to determine whether or not you could actually rank a 542 Chicago.
And it turns out, the most complicated team in the region, Chicago, we just get right in the middle, perfect, like 6th, nailed it.
But then, keep grinding.
Then when it comes down to Carthage and St. Norbert, I'm really surprised here. I know the data shifted. Carthage, I'm again trying to remember results. I think did they lose a game this week? So their criteria maybe gets a little bit worse. St. Norbert's criteria gets a little bit worse too. I'm just sitting here thinking, if we ranked Carthage, I know that the data is all a little bit different, so this is a little bit unfair to say, but if we ranked Carthage last week, why are we suddenly ranking St. Norbert this week? I don't feel like the data in my mind shifted that much. Again, I'll have to go back and review it. I don't remember it all off the top of my head, but we see Carthage having a more reasonable strength of schedule than St. Norbert does. We see their regionally ranked win being better. They each only have one. I don't know if it was a difference of like Carthage was 0.504 or something last week, and this week they're 0.499, and if just that just kind of looks a little bit different, and it's
psychological barrier.
Yeah, psychologically it just looks like, oh, we can rank this team higher. I don't know. And again, all of the data is moving, so there's probably more factoring into the decisions. And maybe it was so tight last week and it's so tight this week that it just slightly shifts things. So it's just interesting. I think that was one that surprised me. I'm very happy to see St. Norbert ranked. Our Calvin Knights played and beat St. Norbert, so that's great. That's like a perfect result for me. I was just a little bit surprised, happily, to see that being made.
Yeah, my reaction to it is it feels like this was a deference to winning percentage like we haven't really seen over the last few years.
Yeah.
Right? I don't really know how to explain it other than that.
Well, maybe
like you said, maybe
one for them, one for you. You get the Chicago into the rankings, and like, okay, then we got to give it up for the winning percentage on the other side.
Right. Little politicking there.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. Region 8. That's the mess that is Region 8.
Yeah.
All right.
That was a tough one for us this week.
That was a tough one. Let's move on to Region 9, Matt. Let's talk about another perfect one here. Region 9, Platteville's number 1, Nebraska Wesleyan 2, Co 3rd, Dubuque 4th, Loris 5th, St. John 6th, and Bethany Lutheran 7th. Now we got this one perfectly right, Matt, but I don't think that this was as easy as it maybe seemed, or some of the other perfect regions we got, fell into place
Yeah.
nicely. There were some real discussions we had to have, especially with that Loris, St. John's, Bethany, even Central, who didn't make the regional
Yeah.
rankings, who were probably just off the board at 8th if you kept the rankings going. Um, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, this was a complicated one. Right away, starting at Loris, I think. I think the top four fell into place once Dubuque had beaten Loris to make that a split. I think those top four end up pretty solid there. But then starting with Loris, it's really difficult to know exactly what the order is going to be. We ultimately went with Loris. The strength and quantity of the regionally ranked wins. I feel like we've said that a dozen times in this episode, but that's making a big difference. They're staying buoyed by that, I think, above St. John's and Bethany Lutheran. Um, and then the decision on Central is interesting because 667 winning percentage is low compared to the group, but 567 is a good number. I think ultimately their 3-7 versus regionally ranked wasn't strong enough to help them pass Bethany Lutheran and St. John's, who both also have 2 wins. They also own a head-to-head loss against Bethany Lutheran. So I think that definitely kept Central down. And as we said, Central's going to probably have to make a deep ARC run, if not win it, to get into the tournament now. But yeah, this was a challenging one. I was kind of surprised to see us get it in order. A little bit of a luck factored into that, I think, for us, getting it exactly right. But I think we got some tight resumes there from Loris onto Central to a large degree.
And you mentioned, as we talked about Mount Union in Region 7, St. John's moving back into the regional rankings here will add a regional rank win to Mount Union's resume. Central dropping out is going to have an impact too because of all the other ARC teams in the mix here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Depending on, in some cases, that might be 1, might be 2 in that RRO category that's going to drop out. So we'll have to see what kind of impact that has going forward.
Yeah, ARC's hoping that Bethany Lutheran and St. John's maybe stumble in their conference tournaments and open up a spot for Central to slide back in because weeks 3 and 4 count in regional rankings. So if you've got one of these regional ranked wins this week, it's going to carry forward and count, but week 4 will also be added in, so you get a chance to maybe rank Central in there. That'll be interesting. And I really hope Mount Union did play St. John's because we've been talking about that a lot, and I'm pretty sure that happened. But, when we hit record, I suddenly forget every result that has happened throughout the year, and I'm just kind of making stuff up as we go. So hopefully that was correct.
One more region to talk about here, Region 10. Another perfect region here, Matt. Cal-Lu takes the top spot in Region 10 this week, followed by Trinity, Texas, St. Thomas, Texas, Pomona-Pitzer's 4th, Claremont-Mudd-Scripps 5th, Hardin-Simmons 6th, and Mary Hardin-Baylor enters the Region 10 regional rankings at number 7. Matt, that's one we got correct, but I think before we started our discussion, if either one of us had texted each other and said, "Hey, I think we're going to rank Mary Hardin-Baylor this week," we would have laughed at each other, right?
Yeah.
But as we went through the process, we're like, wow, I think we're ranking Mary Hardin-Baylor this week, and then look what happens.
Yeah, they were definitely off the radar, but you're right. I think in this region, the top 6 fell into place very clearly. We had the Cal Lutheran versus Trinity discussion, but again, we decided good wins for Trinity kind of won out, or for Cal Lutheran kind of won out over Trinity there. But yeah, when you got down to the end, we saw last week Redlands was ranked with a very marginal resume. This week, with what the two teams had done, it ended up very, very even. You can see the winning percentage and strength of schedules there very, very close. RROs 2-3 versus 2-7. They both have beaten Illinois Wesleyan, so there's a lot of similarities between those resumes. We noted that the Williams versus Hardin-Simmons wins were maybe close, but distinctly in Redlands' favor there. So there's a couple things the committee could have been looking at. There's an NCSOS advantage for Mary Hardin-Baylor, quite strong. So maybe they did take a look at the second page and say, well, this is a pretty decided advantage. Maybe they looked at the 2-3 versus regionally ranked and said Mary Hardin-Baylor to a larger degree took advantage of their opportunities, whereas Redlands was 2-7, largely did not. They have 2 good ones, but again, in conference, they played Pomona twice, Claremont twice, Cal Lutheran twice, didn't get a win there. Maybe they, it's not, again, the criteria is not percentage, but maybe they looked at those results and figured, if there's a team we want to rank here, maybe they would have won a game or 2 extra. I don't know exactly how they looked at it. Could have been just non-conference strength of schedule was enough. But yeah, I think either way, we were surprised, but confident that Mary Hardin Baylor would at least be in the discussion there.
Obviously, they looked at it the same way we did.
Yeah.
There you go.
Another perfect
All
region.
right. Another perfect region, Matt. That was 5 perfect regions. We did quite well.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good. Good job, team. All right, Matt. Any big messages or takeaways that you have? I mean, I feel like we saw a few things that maybe we haven't seen or maybe haven't noticed in the past. Like I mentioned, maybe a case where winning percentage actually was deferred to over strength of schedule. It seems like earlier in the couple weeks ago we said when in doubt, go strength of schedule. Maybe that's not always the case. I think there's definitely a preference toward some strong RROs in terms of a lot of games played. If you're going to play a lot, you had better have shown that you've won a lot too. I think that's it for me. Anything from you that you really have, taking to heart after what we've seen here?
For the most part, I think it's continuing trends. The committee's not going to rank a team just because they have a good winning percentage if they don't feel like they've played a strong schedule, at least in relation to the other teams that might be considered in those same spots. It doesn't really matter if you've won 80-85% of your games. If you have like a SOS in the 460 range and there's really any other viable options, I think they're going to go a different direction largely. Some of that also has to do with the results versus regionally ranked opponents. And I think they're very much looking for, do you have at least a result or two against a team that ranks, highly in the top 1 or 2, maybe 3 spots in a region, or kind of like a top 16 nationally type of a team. If you don't have one of those wins, you're going to want to be pretty overwhelming in a couple of the other categories to feel very, very strongly about your position come Selection Sunday for at-large bid consideration. Definitely having like a 550 plus SOS helps, but I think they're really keying in on those regionally ranked wins, the top quality of those wins to help differentiate teams. And maybe they're looking at it as a way that gives them confidence that that's the type of team that can compete on the national level and will enter the tournament with a chance to win, a weekend or something like that.
So the week 3 regional rankings are the last that are publicly released, at least ahead of the tournament bracket reveal. So Matt, we're off the hook for future predictions.
Yes.
Of course, we'll have to set a board to be able to make Pool C projections because that will all be based on the order of that unpublished week 4 regional rankings. But this will be the last kind of predictions and reactions review episode for us. Going to be a little bit of a different week for us next week. Instead of a normal show Monday, since we'll have the national tournament bracket reveal, there will not be a Monday morning show. We'll have something in the afternoon probably to give some just initial reactions, off the cuff type stuff to the bracket that we see. And then we'll go into more of a normal show prep, get something out in terms of those first weekend pod projections and some predictions for the first weekend of the tournament. And then, Matt, we're going to follow that right up with another episode where we zoom back and take a look at the tournament overall, look at some of the paths that teams have, maybe some overall championship odds. Anyone who was with us last year, we're going to follow that same pattern that seemed to do pretty well. And hopefully, Matt, one of the things I think that we can do, and I really like doing, is being able to bring some context to the bracket and to the tournament. We see that in Division I March Madness. We know when a 12 seed beats a 5 seed, what that means in these type of matchups. When we get a bracket that maybe we can identify like who the top overall seeds are, or we know who's hosting pods, so we have a loose sense of some seeding. But with some of the stuff that we have with efficiency ratings, we can dig in and approximate a little bit more where those like 12-5 matchups are, and what is maybe an upset, or maybe what might not be an upset depending on how it goes. So looking forward to it. It's a fun time of year, and it's only going to get more fun from here.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Again, this is the time of year we've been aiming for all season long with those Pool C selections. I think I'll probably be participating on Hoopsville again, Selection Sunday. So then we'll get that bracket reveal Monday. So that'll be fun, Zach. Also want to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters, those people who've been supporting us throughout the season, helping us produce these episodes, help us to keep d3datacast.com ad-free. If you want to go to d3datacast.com, the regional rankings tab for both men's basketball and women's basketball is updated daily. They're already updated with the new regional rankings, so results versus regionally ranked opponents are updated. Check that out there. Special thanks to these people. Zach, I think we got a new member this week.
We do. A new Great Job team supporter, Gregory Bellavance. Thanks for the support. Glad to have you on board, and definitely glad to have the ongoing support of everyone else listed here.
Fun time of season. Go out and win your Pool A's, everybody. Good job, team.